Sure. Thank you, sir.
This is my office.
And my grandpa. Oh, gracious. A truck got to him before I could, unfortunately. It was such a shame, too, because I had devised the perfect way to take him out.
What is independent film? Independent film, also known as indie film, are typically categorized as feature-length or short film created and produced outside of a major film production company. Indie films are sometimes distributed by independent entertainment companies as well. If you frequent YouTube often, you may notice that many indie projects are being published and produced. But what you may not know is that before the 2000s to 2010s, indie animation had a drastically different style and subject matter. Today I want to discuss prominent indie animated films that I have watched over the years, and how the central themes encompassing older indie animation have drastically begun to shift to the style of indie works we may know of today. As the Walt Disney Studio and its earliest competitors began to take off around the early to mid 20th century, there were many amateurs and ex-Disney animators during this time who also wanted a slice of the popular animation pie. Much of animation during this time was associated with fairy tales and traditional sexist gender norms.
All thanks to the Mouse Man himself.
Though, this will all begin to change within the world of indie animation with the arrival of Ralph Bakshi. Ralph Bakshi, co-founder of Bakshi Productions, is the creator of the animated film Fritz the Cat, which was the first ever animated film to ever receive an X rating from the MPAA, and is the highest grossing indie animated film. Many more cult classic films came out of the rays of Bakshi's success, like Don Bluth's The Secret of NIMH, who would also go along to produce many successful family-oriented indie animated films, as well as Jerry Rees' The Brave Little Toaster. What all these films have in common is that even though they may seem family-friendly on their posters or DVD covers, many of these films can be extremely graphic at some points. These kinds of films typically end up being indie-produced sometimes due to their graphic nature, and most big-name studios refuse to work with such content. If there weren't traditional nuclear family values or fairy tales involved in the story, big animation studios would want nothing to do with it. 3 of my personal favorite indie animated films during this time period have to be the US indie animation The Last Unicorn from 1982, the German indie animation Felidae from 1994, and the British indie animation Plague Dogs from 1982. Each are interesting and entertaining in their own rights, and I highly recommend that you all check them out if you have not. There's something very interesting about having an animated film with talking animals, then all of a sudden it would take a dark turn. It scratches a weird itch in my adult brain, and it fills a weird entertainment niche that I am unable to obtain from classically animated films. But as the millennia approached its end, this also signified new beginnings for not just the new century, but also for indie animation as a whole. YouTube is a social media platform that was released in early 2005. With its release, a boom in online video skits, informational videos, vlogs, and many more were uploaded to the site. As the platform began to age, more and more people began posting many different forms of videos. One of these kinds of videos were web animations. With the availability of more proficient technology, people would be able to create animated content from the comfort of their homes without relying on the budget or technology of a large company. Many of us have most likely been present for the publications of many early indie animated web series, like The Annoying Orange and Charlie the Unicorn. While most indie works were being created and published on YouTube as multi-episode series, the indie animated film industry was beginning to take a more artistic and relatively PG approach, unlike its feature-length animated predecessors. Some popular animated films during this time include Brazilian animation Boy in the World, the world's first fully painted feature-length animated film, Loving Vincent, and French animated film Persepolis. Each of these films were masterfully crafted in their own ways, whereas web animation has decided to take its own approach to the medium and stylization. Some indie web animated series still contain the graphic and somewhat comedic nature of earlier indie animated films, like Salad Fingers and works produced by Mondo Media, an indie animated web series publisher. Their animated series, Happy Tree Friends and Figures, are primary examples of this comedically graphic stylization geared towards teens and young adults. Another publication site that was super popular among Adobe Flash animators was Newgrounds. A popular web series that came out of the site was Eddsworld, created by Ed Gold. Later on down the line, it would soon be taken up by his best friend Tom Ska, creator of the ASDF movie animations, after Ed Gold's unfortunate passing. Despite many of these entertaining, yet graphic, indie web series being prevalent during this point in time, a new generation of young animators would begin to make their appearances known towards the tail end of the 2010s and would begin working on current passion projects of their own. If you have been frequenting the animation side of YouTube within the past decade, you may have noticed a massive surge in indie animation projects. Earlier on, indie projects were typically led and produced by Disney veterans, whereas indie projects nowadays are primarily being produced and worked on by current students or alumni, or even self-taught animation students. Due to the accessibility and the popularization of the animated medium from films and web series over the years, many students and even self-taught individuals have since been honing in on their skill and talent for animation and have since been working on their passion projects we may have been hearing of today. Here, we also begin to see an interesting tonal shift with indie web projects, as many popular indie animations have toned down on the graphic content and have since relied on more laid-back adult humor. Currently, my all-time favorite indie animated series has to be Big Top Burger, created by Worthy Kids, with Lackadaisy, created by Tracy J. Butler, following in as a close second. I have also been hopeful since the release of the pilot episode of The Amazing Digital Circus, as it is one of the only 3D rendered indie projects I have personally seen since the popularization in indie web series genre. Because of open source programs like Blender and funding tools like Patreon and Kickstarter, many teams of indie animators can work on their upcoming projects without the major need for studio backing. The downside to this is that, to be successful within the indie animation industry, you need to be telling an interesting story that is appealing to almost everyone. Unfortunately, if you're unable to produce a good story with good characters, your story may just end up in the bin. There has been an increase in indie animation success stories over the few years. For example, the colorful pastel web animated series, Bee and Puppy Cat, created by Natasha Alagiri, is a popular crowdfunding success story in the world of indie animation, and it has received $200,000 over its $600,000 Kickstarter goal in 2004. In 2018, a full season containing 10 short episodes of the series was released for free on YouTube. 2 years later, the popular streaming service, Netflix, announced its purchase of the show. You can watch the newer version of Bee and Puppy Cat on Netflix today, or if you prefer, the original episodes should still be up if you would like to see how the series originally looked before its Netflix makeover. Even though web series are abundant nowadays online, feature-length indie projects are still being produced today, like Flea, 2021, I Lost My Body, 2019, and Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, 2022, which have been very successful, especially with Marcel the Shell, as it was nominated for the Best Animated Feature Film of 2022. In the end, indie animated works have had very humble beginnings, emerging from the shadows of a now dominant multimedia conglomerate in the entertainment industry. Overall, indie animation nowadays hasn't given us any reason to shy away from it. If anything, it's important to recognize and give some love to our indie content creators and filmmakers, as many of them have been serving us refreshing content that we would otherwise not receive from everyone's favorite big name studios. I hope you all enjoyed my video. If you could do me a favor and share a little love with your favorite small content creators by sharing a like, leaving a kind comment, or just spreading the word, this means wonders to your favorite creator, and by doing so, there will be more content to come for you and your fellow fans in the future.